So yeah, it'd be great if you say hi in the chat, where you're from, and just as an illustration of just how diverse we are, I'd love to hear what was the last thing that you ate before the conference. And after all, digital theologians cannot live on bits and bytes alone. So I'm Jonas Kurlberg. I'm a research fellow at the Center for Digital Theology at Durham University. I also manage the MA in Digital Theology, which is now hosted by Spurgeon's College in London. Normally I live in Durham, but at the moment I'm on an island in the archipelago just outside Gothenburg in Sweden. And I've just had my dad's raw pickled herring and potatoes from the garden for lunch. Before I hand over to Kyle, who will give you a little bit more information about the conference itself, I wanted to say something about the global network for digital theology. For decades, theologians have reflected on the ramifications of the digitalization of the world, but there was a felt need for a more concerted effort to advance this field of study. And with that, a space for collaboration, sharing of ideas, and friendship based on similar interests. And this is really the vision of the Global Network for Digital Theology. In September 2019, we hosted a workshop in Durham, I should say, in order to gauge just what the interest was in a more deliberate effort. And the network is really an outcome from this workshop. So we're still early days. We have formed an advisory board. We participated in seminars and conferences. We created some video content, and you can find that on YouTube. There is quite an active Facebook group where people share articles and events and so forth. And during the summer, we have been running a co-design course together with Turkey University, and that was in order to create an online platform with some students. And we are almost ready for that to go online. And tomorrow, Erkki Suutinen, who's been part of the project, he will talk a little bit more about this before he leads the prayers. Do get in touch with me or anyone else in our group if you have any ideas of what we should be doing as a network, and if you want to get involved in realizing these. It's just great to see the chat and just the number of people from around the world, and just some of the food there as well. It's good to see. So this is our first annual conference, and I hope that they will embody something of the ethos of the network: ecumenism, friendship, collaboration, and a generous cross-cultural and interdisciplinary engagement. So I'll now hand over to Kyle Schiefelbein-Guerrero, who will give you some information about the conference. Kyle is an assistant professor in worship and liturgy at United Lutheran Seminary. And we've been working together on this conference for about a year now, I think. And Kyle, it's been just great working with you. I know that you're in California, so I'm a bit sorry that you had to get up early this morning. How are you doing?
I am doing well. It is early here. It is almost 6 o'clock in the morning on the West Coast, where I will be for the next 2 weeks before heading back to Philadelphia. And so the only thing I've had so far since I woke up 45 minutes ago has been a cup of coffee, but I think that'll help me get through the rest of the day. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you, or good night. I know some of you, this is the middle of the night. As Jonas said, I'm Kyle Schiefelbein-Guerrero. My field is actually worship and liturgy, but prior to having this, my current professorship, I was the director of digital learning at my alma mater, Graduate Theological Union, which is where I really started to explore the intersection of theology and technology as a way to bring my academic discipline and my current occupation together. As Jonas mentioned, this conference, our first truly global conference for the Global Network, sprang out of a gathering that happened in Durham in 2019. After that, we also had a panel in 2019 at the American Academy of Religion entitled Defining Digital Theology. And that was based on an article that Jonas, Pete Phillips, and I wrote for the journal Open Theology, trying to figure out what exactly is this emerging field that now we have a global network for. The original plan was to have an in-person conference in Philadelphia last summer. But of course, as you are all aware, a little thing called COVID-19 happened and prevented any sorts of gathering and travel. And so, of course, this provided both a challenge and an opportunity. The challenge is that it really disrupted our plans, as it disrupted pretty much everyone's plans around the world. But it also provided us an opportunity to rethink, as a group of digital theologians and practitioners, how we could gather and truly be a global network. And so we have over 250 people registered who I keep clicking the admit button for in the waiting room over these 3 days. The challenge, of course, is to try to find a time where at least a majority of you will be awake during the conference so that you can fully participate. Because this is truly a global conference, just a reminder, and this will be reiterated by the moderators in each session, is that we have people from all over the world who are at various levels in their academic careers, various levels of proficiency with English, and various cultural expectations. And so that is something for us to keep in mind as we engage together in conversation, is to remember that we are truly a global community and a global network. So I welcome you. I'm thankful that you are here. I'm especially thankful for Jonas and his partnership in working on this endeavor together. This is the first time I've organized such a large conference. And I think, at least from our perspective, it seems rather smooth. I'm hoping that will be from your perspective as well. At the beginning of each session, the moderator will give you some idea of how each session will operate, including some house rules, so that the conference can go together well. With that, because we are a global network of theologians and practitioners at various levels, we are starting each day with a prayer. And so I will turn it over to Sara to begin us with our opening prayer for today's conference.
Yes, thank you so much, Kyle, and thank you, Jonas, for this wonderful conference. It is indeed an amazing, looking at the names is wonderful. Let's start with a devotion. Let's first prepare ourselves for a few minutes, a few seconds, and then I will just give you a brief devotion. Before that, I'd like to tell you a little bit about me. I am also my name is Sara. I did my PhD at Edinburgh University, Sara Afshari. And my PhD was on media, religion, and culture, and mainly how Muslims interact and negotiate with religious message coming from Christian media into their own culture and context, and how do they interpret that and engage with that. Anyway, it's been also good to be part of that. And let's now start with a reflection on our conference. Heavenly Father, please send your Holy Spirit to us and help us and guide us and lead us through this conference. We ask in your name, Amen. Genesis 1 verses 26 says, "Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all creatures that move along the ground. God created us in his image and likeness. Many interpret the image and likeness as synonym. However, few scholars, especially within the Orthodox traditions, separate image and likeness. One image refers to righteousness and holiness of God, a unique characteristics that separate us from other creatures, and the other, likeness, refers to power to share in God's rule and responsibility. It also refers to sharing the wisdom of God. So his given authority comes with his wisdom. God has equipped us from the moment of creation with his wisdom. Verses 27 and 28 highlights that under the umbrella of God's wisdom, we were given power and authority, power to steer and power to govern and control. And we were called to use them wisely. And Bible also reminds us that some misused and abused them. And we see that in our world as well. So as we collectively journeying into digital future in this rocket ship, and as digital become dominant force of our lives, we are once again called to go back to the image and likeness of God. Not only to become fruitful, but also to revise our thinking and our strategy and theology in navigating and steering this rocket ship that all of us are in it. Where are we going? How to take control and direct it? Where do we want to take it? And what do we want to do with it? Be fruitful and multiply. Rule over the sea, the sky, and land. From the early days of life, we learn to design our own software to deal with things and beings, create and control things and beings, and we were ahead of the game until recently. However, how far did we go? Have we lost control recently, especially during this digital age? How far are we willing to go? Where are the boundaries? There are lots of questions. And these questions are also the reason we are here. We are coming together and we decided to think about those questions. It seems our creation, digital technology, is superseding us. It seems that we have entered into a race between the growing power of technology and the growing wisdom of humanity. Who is going to win to guide and rule the sea, the sky, and land? God saw all that he made, and it was very good. The speed of technology does not give us time to sit back and see and to learn from our mistakes and our experience as we did in the past. We have to upgrade ourselves continuously to match the speed of technology. How can we do that? One place to seek an answer is within God's image and God's likeness. A constant renewal of God's image and likeness in us in order to upgrading ourselves into the heart of the image of God. We need to re-strategize our theology in such a way that can upgrade itself with new wisdom and power to create new ways of regenerating the image and likeness of God in our humanity, so we can safely steer and control this rocket ship that all of us are in it, and direct it to its rightful and safe destination. Can we do that? We can't do that alone. That is why we come together. And that is why we are here today. And for that, I am so excited to be part of you in this moment to think and rethink who we are in God's image and who we are becoming in this digital age. Then with that, let's bow our head for a few minutes and reflect on our responsibility and on our position in this digital age, especially as a theologian, scholars, and practitioner. So once again, Heavenly Father, we ask your direction. We ask your divine wisdom may be distributed among us and lead us through this conference. We ask in your name, Amen.
Amen.
Okay, thank you very much, Sara. We'll now have our first sessions. Those of you who want to stay in the A session can remain here, and Kai will moderate this session. Otherwise, you will need to leave the meeting, and I'm putting in the Zoom link there now in the chat, and you can join us there as we start. Okay, so see you in a bit. Bye.
Welcome all to this first session in the A track. The A and non-lettered track will be on this Zoom account, this Zoom meeting for the next 3 days. The one that Jonas posted in the chat is the B track, where when we have two going on at the same time, which we really had to do because we had so many amazing abstracts submitted that we couldn't limit ourselves to the number we wanted originally. So we had to devise a way to have as many papers as possible. In this first session, we have 2 papers, both of which have been already posted on Cursors. If you have not had an opportunity, make sure to take a look. And each paper will have a respondent. I will introduce everyone first, and then we will go on. So it'll be the first presentation, which is about 10 minutes. The assigned respondent to the first presentation, 5 minutes. Second paper presentation, 10 minutes. Second response, 5 minutes. And then we will have an open discussion. Just a couple of house rules. Please stay muted until you have been acknowledged to speak, either as the person who is assigned to speak or not. When you do want to speak in terms of the discussion session at the end, use the hand raising function in Zoom, and you'll find that in either the reactions button at the bottom of your Zoom page or on the right-hand side in your participants list. If you wish to give your question or your response in written form, you can do so in the chat. That also means for us to reserve the chat space to be more germane to what is happening in the Zoom session at that time, rather than as a side chat. As I mentioned, we have, it's a global network, so we have people of various academic levels, people of various levels of proficiency in English and cultural commitments. So be aware of that in your discussion time. And if you are tweeting, our hashtag is GoneDigital2021, if you wish to do any tweeting. And as I mentioned earlier, we are recording. So let me begin with the introduction of the people for this session. Our first presentation is by Anna Puzio, who is a PhD candidate in philosophy at the Department of Medical Ethics at the Munich School of Philosophy in Germany. She's a member of the interdisciplinary graduate school, Ethics, Culture, and Education in the 21st Century, with a doctoral scholarship of the Hans Seidel Foundation. She is also a research assistant of philosophy in the Department of Catholic Theology in the University of Münster. Her respondent will be Kenneth Wilkinson-Roberts, who is a PhD candidate at Lancaster University in the Department of Politics, Philosophy, and Religion. Their research considers questions at the intersections of religious studies, technology, and international relations. The second paper is a jointly written paper of 3 people, and I believe Srebrenka will be the one giving the main presentation. Srebrenka Kunek is the founder of My Pilgrims Way, a pioneer ministry which is now being integrated into the Anglican Diocese of Bendigo. Srebrenka has a wide experience of systems change, education, and digital technology. She is a visiting scholar at St. John's College, Center for Digital Theology at Durham University. Fergus King is the Farnham Maynard Lecturer in Ministry and Director of Ministry Education Center at Trinity College, Melbourne. He's worked in the UK, Tanzania, and Australia. He's published widely on New Testament and missiological themes. Matt Brain is the Bishop of the Anglican Diocese of Bendigo and has been since 2018. He has experience in rural and remote ministries and has lectured on ministry and outreach at St. Mark's Theological College in Canberra. So with all those introductions, I will turn it over to Anna for the presentation based on her paper, Digital and Technological Identities in Whose Image?
Thank you. Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Or is this the reference view, or have I? So you're sure it's okay?
Yep, everything looks good.
Okay, fine. Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation and the introduction. I hope you can see the presentation now. I'm delighted to be here today to talk to you about technological and digital identities, identity construction in social media and technology. My dissertation is on the anthropology and ethics of transhumanism. In this presentation, however, I will investigate the anthropology of technology in today's society. This paper has examined how technological changes transform understandings of the human being and the body, and what new approaches in anthropology this leads to. The presentation, like the paper, is divided into 4 sections. First, I deal with the question, how do technologies alter our understanding of human beings? Section 2 then moves on to consider the relationship between human and machine. Section 3 goes on to discuss new anthropological ethical challenges of modern technologies. Finally, section 4 provides a practical theological approach to identity construction in social media. This section used selected technology to illustrate how the use of technology has changed understandings of the human being and the body. Sensory perception, for example, has not merely been imitated and expanded by technology, but also transformed. Through hearing aids, microphones, cameras, glasses, and contact lenses, human beings can now see and hear differently. Thermometers, modern biofeedback devices, fitness trackers, and basically all medical measurement devices have shown a shift from relying upon one's own physical senses to information provided by the devices. With the notion of cyborgs, the body has almost merged with technology. It has become clear that a new, intimate connection between the human or the body and technology is emerging. The boundaries between organisms and machines have increasingly become blurred. In section 3, these blurred boundaries were further explored. Based on the history of the machine and the machine metaphor, it has become apparent that there is no prior understanding of the machine. So what is considered a machine and what is included in the idea of the machine is subject to constant change. Human self-reflection takes place when confronted with machines. In the same way, robots, automata, or prostheses have offered insights into the understanding of the human being and the body and negotiated such understandings. Section 4 explored how the boundaries of organism and machine, as well as the understanding of the human and the body, can be renegotiated. Technology was considered in two different ways: as a question and as a response. On the one hand, it can be read as an answer. It offers an answer to what understanding of the human and the body is unconspicuously incorporated into technology. So what normative implications are being made? Which voices are neglected? Theology has to consider who produces technology and which social groups are underrepresented. Here, cultural, racist, and discriminatory implication, as well as assumptions about gender, can also be uncovered. Robots for service and assistance, for example, are often female. What goals are inscribed in technology? On the other hand, technology must also be read as a question. In whose image and according to which values should technological processes be shaped? It can bring human beings back to the question of what it means to be human in the first place, and can be seen as an opportunity to renegotiate understandings of human beings. The technologies and various body-machine approaches or hybrids have opened up opportunities to renegotiate concepts of the human and the body. These answers refer back to a question that enables responsible design and agency. They are questions of how human beings want to shape the relationship between body and technology. In this way, it is precisely from the thoughts of machine as constructs and spaces of negotiation that the possibility of taking responsibility and developing autonomy can be derived. Machines are not a force beyond our control. To this end, the anthropological ethical approaches of critical posthumanism were presented, and perspectives for reshaping of anthropology were derived. Critical posthumanism is a movement that strives to gain a new understanding of the human being, desiring to overcome the current, in its view, humanistic understanding of the human being. An important figure in critical posthumanism is the cyborg, which does not denote an actual fusion of humans and technology, but is used as an ethical figure from a political, epistemological, and ontological position. As a cybernetic organism in which technical and organic material are mixed, she cannot be placed in a fixed category. Her existence refuses a fixed and ambiguous identity. Instead, her identity is fragmented, partial, and unfinished. Critical posthumanism offers many starting points to reshape understandings of the human being and the body against the backdrop of modern technology. Arguments were made against rigid attributions of identity, various dichotomies, discriminatory implication, essentialism, anthropocentrism, and speciesism. An anthropology that takes the cyborg seriously cannot start from a fixed catalogue of human characteristics. The cyborg can be understood as a subversive figure that constantly calls to mind the indeterminacy of the human being, of its openness and changeability. The cyborg and her body, which cannot be universalized, stands for a plurality of understandings of the human being and the body, but at the same time also draw out the differences between people and the differences between the various bodies. A special feature of critical posthumanism is its close linking of anthropology and ethical considerations. An interesting question to discuss would be whether various technologies might also be understood as part of the body. Can they be integrated into the understanding of the body and also constitute part of what body means? In this way, the new blurring of boundaries through modern technologies can contribute to a pluralistic, inclusive, and diverse understanding of people and bodies. After approaches for a contemporary philosophical, theological anthropology were suggested, the focus in section 4 was directed towards concrete practice. In social media, it is already concretely clear how technology has been integrated into the reality of people's lives and how important identity construction processes take place here. Social media enable new forms of narration of one's own biography and identity. Despite virtuality, the role of the body has not diminished, but new attention has been paid to the body in nutrition, fitness, and fashion. In whose image is identity constructed in social media? Who are the role models, the influencers? There are unattainable ideals of beauty and perfect bodies, but there are also body positivity and accounts that address mental problems, health problems, and diversity. Identity is fragile and fluid according to Vera Pirker and fragmentary according to Henning Luther. Henning Luther, identity as is evident in social media is thus fragile and pluralistic, subject to constant change and standing in tension between contingency and wholeness. Theology should accompany the construction of identity. Such a theological perspective is able to bear the tension between a limitation and dislimitation of a human being without fixing the human being. On the one hand, it takes into account their vulnerability and creatureliness. It makes it possible to deal with contingency. On the other hand, such a perspective attributes wholeness to the human being, but does not fall into the ideological trap of assuming a perfect identity. Only if the theological conceived identity of the human being is understood as an open, unfinishable identity that is constantly in the process of becoming, can it account for the possibility of change. This paper argues that technological processes and social media should be perceived as places of theology. This means that shaping technological process and social media must be done responsibly and autonomously, because in technological change, identity as well as the understanding of the human being and the body are renegotiated. The understanding of human beings has an impact on how human beings determine their actions, relationships, and society as a whole. There's a need for further theological engagement with technology and an intensive study of how theology can actively contribute in concrete terms. Some church communities and organizations have already discovered these places for themselves. A theology that hopes to address the reality of young people's lives must also go to these places because a large part of many young people's lives takes place here. And to do this, it will be necessary to creatively explore new paths. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm looking forward to receiving your feedback.
Thank you, Anna. I'll turn it over to Kenneth to give the response.
Hi, I don't have a presentation, so I'm just going to talk, but if people want my script afterwards, I can email that out to you. Thank you so much for inviting me to respond to this paper. It's been really great. And I want to spend the next few minutes asking some questions of my own and hopefully prompting some interesting discussion about this paper. I'm going to start with an example. When drones were first incorporated into the UK Armed Forces, many argued against their use. Among these arguments were a group of RAF pilots who argued that piloting drones was emasculating and stripped them of their virility, operational and otherwise. Here, drones threatened not just their professional lives as pilots, but also their identities as pilots, which it seems was inextricably linked to their identities as manly men and good airmen. Anna Puzio's paper offers an excellent philosophical theological lens through which to explore examples like this one, where technology can be seen to influence, disrupt, and contribute to understandings of the human and the body, individually and corporately. I'm not going to summarize the paper, but there's a summary in my script if people want one. As a queer and interdisciplinary researcher, the call in this paper to create an interdisciplinary conversation surrounding technology and identity is refreshing and exciting, and says something important about how reorganizing blurred boundaries requires an approach that is equally blurry and unbounded. As such, what other disciplines and voices should we bring into this discussion? And what gaps might a predominantly philosophical theological approach leave behind? My research asks pastoral questions about examples like the emasculated RAF pilots, where technology creates disruptions and hazards which puncture a warfighter's pastoral and moral security, and as well, as is often the case, their ontological and theological imaginings of themselves. Indeed, the disruption and reorganizing of identity for me is inherently pastoral, as well as a philosophical theological problem. As such, I want to ask how the thinking in this paper can be used in practice by theologians, ministers, and lay people to engage with the issues which surround the disruption and reorganizing of identity by technology. And finally, one insight that I find so important in this paper, despite it being an implicit one, is that the blurring of boundaries is not and ought not to be a purely anthropocentric one. Anna Puzio writes, technology and various body-machine approaches have opened up spaces to renegotiate the concepts of the human and the body. Thus, these not only offer answers that can be determined through deconstruction and other methods, but these answers refer back to a question that enables responsible design and agency. They are questions of how human beings want to shape the relationship between the body and technology. As such, the blurring of ontologies caused by technology does not just prompt us to think about our ontological imaginings of ourselves, but also our ontological understandings of technology. The anthropocentric design and imagining of technology, though not the entirety of technological imaginings, does require critique, not least because of the ontological boundaries which we instill within our technologies, such as racism in machine learning or transphobia in facial recognition. Indeed, the blurring of ontological boundaries directs us towards a reimagining of the ontological shape and place of technology, and prompts us to pay better attention, philosophical, theological attention, to the ways that technology is designed and how it can enact agency. As such, I want to ask what this responsible design of technology might look like, and how we might want to go about reimagining technology and our relationship with it. My time is almost up, but I want to leave you with this. Anna Puzio has shown us that technology, in all of its forms, prompts us to rethink how we understand identity. It invites us to blur our methodological boundaries, to rebuild ourselves and our relationships with others, human and otherwise. And it invites us to reorientate our locations, agency, and priorities surrounding our ontological relationships. So what can we do with these insights? How might we support those who are dealing with the practical implications of these disruptions? And what other voices, ideas, and contributions should be incorporated in these conversations? Once again, it's been fantastic to respond to this paper. I'm sorry for my really loud phone. I don't know what's happening on the internet right now. And I'm really looking forward to the conversations that we're about to have later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenneth. And like I mentioned earlier, what we will do is we'll have all the papers and then we'll have the larger period of discussion. Next up is, like I said, of the three, the kind of the group written paper will be, Srebrenka will be the main presenter. So I will spotlight her and give her a moment to share her screen.
Just a minute. Thank you. Okay, can you see my screen? Hello?
We can see your screen, but we can't see you.
Okay, don't know why. Doesn't matter. The main thing is you can see my screen. Greetings, friends, from Melbourne in Australia. I'm presenting on the part of Fergus King, Bishop Matt Brain, and myself, Anglican Pioneer Minister, with my practice called My Pilgrims Way, a digital ministry platform for digital and place-based mission enterprise. So we are addressing in our paper the question, is online worship real or the equal to face-to-face worship? And I'll stick to the time frame in the three-part presentation. The first part is a theological context. The second part is where I present My Pilgrims Way, which is an example of digital ministry platform and practice. And the third section is where My Pilgrims Way is commented on by Bishop Matt Brain from the Diocese of Bendigo in terms of praxis. So, the question about digital ministry and what is taking place in some of the material that we've been examining is not new. Sorry, there's something wrong with the screen. It's not new. Questions of absence and presence related to God, Christ, and Spirit were being asked by early church worshipping communities. The answer to the question in today's times can be found when we take a missional hermeneutic approach informed by sacramental theology, which provides the answer that it is about taking on board the changing context and environments for church required to be able to provide new questions and answers by theologians. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reframe the question into a statement to state that yes, the digital is real. God lives online when we meet in the changing context of congregating as God's people, informed by digital ministry as online church. But furthermore, a missional hermeneutic approach means our attention is placed on the context, which means we realize that we are a community online, which is as radical as the first Christian liturgical faith responses. So here, I wish to shift the key question as being, how is digital media opening up missional, missio Dei opportunities for church life and digital ministry practices? And here I will provide a case study being My Pilgrim's Way with its website, mypilgrimsway.com. But first, part one, to provide the fairly heavy duty theological context to the presentation. And by the way, please do have a read of the paper and have a look at the video, because then you'll get the full impact. So I have to here summarize. So the context really here is about looking at lifting Christian materials within a contemporary context is inadequate, because a mission hermeneutics is about pointing to the fact that there's a dynamic equivalence. What this means is that scripture is here in a new context, or as Boff describes, it is about a manner, a style, a spirit. It's a dynamic equivalence is important for digital ministry, because the medium here is being pointed to as also being the message, namely the media changes the practice of ministry, as well as how liturgy is presented. Christianity has dealt with immediacy and participation in the Eucharist from the time of the early church. For example, just by looking at how sacrificial meals were presented in the Last Supper provides an example in terms of order and meaning. Here we refer to anamnesis, making present and effective past events and future meanings, as well as events. Eschaton, past reality being presented in the here and now. We also have the example of spiritualization, referencing Second Temple Judaism, and how meanings were reconfigured to include physical absence by early church Christians. Real presence or absence here also references Augustine of Hippo, which is about gifts being delivered to recipients and the real presence of God being part of the debate in most post-biblical thinking. Here referencing Aristotelian categories of substance and accidents, as well as the work of Thomas Aquinas, who radically altered doctrine and liturgical practices. An example here is also seals and the dynamics of the Eucharist, referencing the metamorphosis of the Christian loaf to the coin-like wafer, which is another example. Pilgrimage is also an example of the sanctification of place, which has changed over time. And today we have online pilgrimage with the digital providing new transformations. I now progress to the second part of the presentation. Christian tradition is not static. It's about the context. taking into our vision the changes in understanding and practice, and asking the question of how the digital age has changed the framework and the practices. Missional hermeneutic provides the answer. And here I provide the focus on the human-computer interaction. We change the medium as we are also changed. This is a dynamic, interactive relationship. And here I reference the field of cybernetics, which is absent in digital theological inquiry. It's not simply about church online, streaming a church service. This is about new platforms and interactivities of digital ministry, which are real, merging in relationship. It's about A, the human-computer relationship, B, inquiry into the medium, and C, what is on offer and how this provides opportunities to inform digital ministry practices, liturgical and congregating as Christians. I move very quickly to data because the data tells us. Barna report indicates that 80% of searching online, people who are searching online to do with church and Christianity, are not interested in physical church. We know that online church has increased in the COVID and post-COVID period, which is a continuing trend. In addition, engagement 66% online is higher than face-to-face, according to the Barna reports. There is high engagement in prayer. 66% of the US weekly engagement provides this data. Furthermore, the older generation, Generation X and millennials, have drifted from conventional church. They are looking for new forms of church. So the question really is also, how can prayer be a spark for spiritual renewal? In the UK, 1% of the population attend church in this post-Christian era, according to The Guardian, published 3 weeks ago. In Australia, the percentage of no religion is rising. And however, there's an increase in people stating that they are spiritual. 56% of the population state a belief in God, and 27% state that they are mystical. There's another component to all of this. And here I talk about absence and the need to be aware that engagement in digital ministry is actually quite critical, because when we look at Google search engine, there is an absence of church, the term church or sermon. I wish now to introduce My Pilgrim's Way as a community platform, which, in contrast, for example, to gathering on Facebook, this is a native platform, namely everything is included on the platform, including no advertising. MPW community platform amplifies agency. It enables small groups curating content. It provides organic gathering, worship, pastoral care, prayer. Also, there is MPW Academy, which is the how-to be part of the platform and then continue proliferating. The news in this domain is, in terms of a practical, down-to-earth, from the coalface news, is that it's all about small groups. No longer is it a focus on numbers in order to map out the way forward. What we find it is in practicing on a platform is that it's about being hyperlocal, niche, bespoke. It's all about disciple making for disciple making. Here, the digital is easier, which providing a focus on the relational, Seth Godwin, a marketing expert, he says, it's not about billions of people. It's about craft your message, see the individual. It's about asking questions, not telling, finding ways to solve, experiment, celebrate failures, measure engagement pathways. It's about Mother Church with satellites, sermons breaking up with questions, sermons with breaking up into 3 sections, questions, and then you land the plane. So in many ways, this is a call to mission. Join me on MPW community platform to co-develop, including capacity for podcasts, online radio, prayer, pilgrimages, feasts, one-to-one small groups, place-based and online collaboration, dynamic, operating digitally, unconstrained by physical location. So get in touch with me via email. So what does this look like in an Anglican diocese of Bendigo?
So Srebrenka, I hate to stop, but we've passed our 10 minutes.
Oh, okay, I'll just tie it up.
Okay.
Basically, the digital platform is not a substitute for embodied presence, but it provides for new digital gathering and new forms informed by old patterns. It's a recognition of local expression. And in Bishop Matt's words, MPW is a seed for answering questions of absence and presence in sacramental ministry. Thank you. Whoops. Yeah. Last slide.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And as we can tell, it's always, there's never enough time to say everything we need to say. But remember, go take a look at the papers online. Our respondent to this paper, I forgot to introduce him, so I'll do that now, is Matthew Pulis, who is a Maltese Catholic priest. Prior to joining the seminary, he graduated with a master's in science and informatics from the University of Malta. After a degree in philosophy and theology, he pursued his MA studies at the Center for Digital Theology at the University of Durham. He's currently reading for his doctorate in digital theology, where he is theologically studying the experiential and spiritual needs of Maltese Gen Z people as expressed through their gaming habits. And so, Matthew, I will turn it over to you for your response.
So, thanks to the authors for this intriguing paper. The authors root their discussion on the seemingly continuous relationship, or at least how I interpret it, between past traditions and today's ministry on the how rather than the what. In the how, they speak of a manner, a style, and a spirit. Agreeing in concept, but speaking from a Roman Catholic mindset, I would like to warn against lessening the importance of the what, the techniques involved. While the liturgy is continually reformed, certain aspects of the sacramental life, especially the matter of the sacrament, has been cemented since the apostolic tradition. Hence, while I agree we shouldn't just copy the style, but tease out the spirit, we should be wary of the unfleshed practice and also the media used for the liturgy, because as the authors affirm, the media itself is transformative. The authors emphasize on the Lord's Supper is on the anamnesis, considering the anamnestic command. When we look at the in remembrance of me, the of me refers to Christ as the memorial's object and content. Thus, it refers to his whole salvific mystery. Thus, do this reflects to a complex transcendental action, which makes us remember while making present for us. Through a quick historical tour, the authors reflect on the various liturgical changes, echoing Stewart in concluding that it is odd, and here I quote, that the bread and wine tradition survived, end quote. Yet I believe we do have other liturgical parts which survive, at least in the Catholic tradition. If we are to interpret the Mass through Apolline and Lucan tradition, the emphasis there is on the Eucharistia, the giving thanks, which we find traces in the preface. From a Matthew-Markian tradition, we have also the emphasis on the blood shedding, reminiscent of Exodus 24, which today is refashioned in the Asperger's introductory part. The Eucharistic prayers themselves have been used and reused since the anaphora of Hippolytus, possibly earlier. Likewise, in the domain of pilgrimages, they note that the digital age offers new possibilities. Pilgrimage which do not involve a physical journey. Now, if interpreting this quote through a Maclunist perspective, that the tools change the users, thus this relationship between the digital pilgrim and the digital journey changes, of course, the pilgrim themselves. While I fully agree with the authors, I believe that there is a risk that we might end up watering down, quote, the holistic compendium of spirit and matter, end quote, as philosopher Edith Stein calls the person. I believe we shouldn't just stick to being embodied, but as being indispensably enfleshed beings, as David Wynyard suggests. Having said that, one should applaud initiatives such as the Pioneer Ministry, who are ministering to people who, through a constructivist ontology, are starting a fresh expression of the church, while reimagining the internet as a space of real congregating to discern and implement the Missio Dei. Agreeing with them that God is to be found everywhere and in every, quote, aspect of human experience, end quote, this is not to devalue the importance of the fleshed experience. Echoing Robert Stoddart and agreeing with the authors, I think that the physical movement in a pilgrimage is as essential as the sacred destination itself. Then again, Stoddart furthers that a place becomes sacred through acclamation by popular piety, which you can get online, and through what I interpret as being acknowledged through tradition, magisterium, scripture, etc. While appreciating the hybridity involved in the Melbourne pilgrimage, I must comment that popular piety is here interpreted to be merely social influence. And this need to enter hallowed ground, I believe, has been further highlighted during COVID as we are forced to fast from our churches. In conclusion, this thought-provoking and very challenging paper can be summarized through paraphrasing the author's own concluding remarks. COVID-19 being a crisis is a point of departure for the digitally mediated worship, which thus calls us to reimagine new forms of worship faithful to old patterns, but dare I add, theological tradition. Thank you very much.